Hello and welcome to the Total Saints podcast. We are the weekly Saints podcast, your home for all things Southampton Football Club. This podcast is being live streamed on YouTube, Facebook, X and on Twitch. So good evening if you're watching along live. Our podcast is supported by our loyal Patreon community. Without you, we couldn't make the show each week. So thank you as always. Coming up on the podcast, a third defeat in 4 for Saints, Millwall winning 2-1 at St Mary's. We'll try and work out what's gone wrong lately. Wednesday is a trip to Liverpool in the FA Cup. An unwanted distraction from the league? Maybe. We're going to preview that game shortly. And it's a trip to 18th place Birmingham City on Saturday. Surely a chance to get back to winning ways. I mean, we said that last week, didn't we? So who knows? My name is Martin Starke, and joining me this evening is Steve Grant, the owner of SaintsWeb. Glen Cour is writer of the blog League One -10, and making his TSP debut tonight is Tom Prentki, who's a freelance football writer covering Southampton. All underpinned by our TSP patrons, this is episode 267 of the Total Saints podcast. Now, we start, as always, with the shout-out to our Patreon community because their monthly contributions support this show. There are 4 tiers ranging from £5 to £20 per month. And aside from supporting the podcast, each of those tiers has perks like access to an ad-free version of the podcast. There's exclusive TSP T-shirts, the TSP FPL, and you get access to some of the live events and loads more as well. Earlier this month, we launched the new look TSP shop. Patreons get a special personal discount code on there. We're adding lines all the time. And this week, we launched the ladies collection. There's a great selection of hoodies, T-shirts and mugs on there. If you want to go and check it out, the address is shop.totalsaints.co.uk. And if you'd like to get involved in supporting TSP each month, just head over to patreon.com/Total Saints podcast for more details. All the links are in the podcast show notes and the YouTube description. Now, some sad news today that former Saints player and manager Chris Nicholl has passed away. The 77-year-old former centre-back made 228 appearances for Saints. He was the manager from 1985 to 1991, giving many Saints supporters some great memories. For me, manager for my first visit to the Dell. Glen, you remember him as a player?
I do. I remember us signing him in, I think it was 1977. It was after the cup final, and Lauren McMenemy kind of instigated this policy. We kind of had this policy anyway, but we were signing players who were seen as over the hill by everybody else, and the idea was to get a couple more years out of them and make the most out of their experience. And what we got with Chris Nicholl was, I think he was about 30. He was a Northern Ireland international, which back then was a big deal. You know, we had the home international championships, and it was a big deal to sign a player who was, we were in Division 2, as was the Championship now. To sign an international player was a big deal, and we got promoted in his first season, and he stayed for a further 5 years after that. I think the last one was very injury interrupted when he was 35, 36. But for 4 or 5 years, he, as we established ourselves in the top division, he was a mainstay of the defence. Particularly remember a partnership in Division 1 with Dave Watson, who was a similarly aged England international. And they were, the pair of them were a bit slow. They were just solid, old school, solid, and they did a brilliant job for us, considering we were a very attacking team. So they were kind of left isolated a fair amount. And he's a player that I remember very sort of like fondly from my early days of watching Saints at the Dell. And I mentioned Dave Watson and along with Chris, they've both been reported to be suffering from Alzheimer's in later years, which is a real shame, and it obviously blighted the end of his life. But yeah, as a player, he did a great job for us, and he was one of Lauren McMenemy's golden oldie signings that did really, really well for us for that period of time.
And as a manager, Tom, that must have been, if you're the same sort of age as me, first visit to the Dell, probably sitting in the junior Saints, and Chris Nicholl was the manager, and we played some pretty good football that got people like you and I hooked on going to the club.
Yeah, it was lucky we joined then rather than when Brantford came in afterwards, wasn't it, to replace him in many ways. But you're right, yeah, for a young kid, it was great. Yeah, standing up on the Milton Road end, I think, with on the little stool I had then, and yeah, the Wallace brothers ride out, didn't you? Sort of, and some real characters as well. Even people like sort of Neil Ruddock. I remember one of my first games was when he scored the penalty. I think we beat Newcastle 1-0 in an awful game, but like a relegation scrap that we became really used to. And yeah, he was obviously had that sort of way of getting a real culture about the place, didn't it? And it genuinely was a place people kind of often hated to come then, wasn't it, the Dell? So I think he must have been a fun manager to play for, I think. And it's really sad news. I think Jeremy Wilson, who worked at the Echo for a good while, and working at the Telegraph, he's done a lot of work on the kind of how prevalent it is, sort of footballers, particularly centre halves, as Glen was saying, sort of suffering with dementia and things. And it's sadly it seems sort of really, really widespread, doesn't it? But good memories of Chris Nicholl for sure.
And to be a manager for 6 years, Steve, that doesn't happen these days, does it? And he had some players at his disposal back in the sort of the late 80s, early 90s.
He did, and he was. We were probably a little bit unlucky that period was obviously the years where English football was kind of pariah state in Europe, where we were banned from European competition and stuff. Because you kind of fancy that if we'd had that kind of the carrot dangled of being able to play in European competition, then maybe we might have in that. I think that one the best season under him. I think we finished 7th. I don't think that would have qualified us that year, but maybe you're then pushing a little bit harder at the back end of that season to finish a little bit higher. And then Europe could have seen the attacking talent that we had on display most weeks. But yeah, I mean, Nicholl was slightly before my time. Unfortunately, my first game was under Ian Bramford. So yeah, I was set up a very low bar of expectation to begin with. But yeah, certainly beforehand, the Nicholl years were interesting from sort of all reports and stuff. I mean, obviously everyone refers back to that Liverpool game where we gave them an absolute hiding at the Dell. 4-1 could have been 14 by all accounts, and that was kind of probably the peak of Saints football through. I mean, obviously, I know we were pretty successful in the early 80s in terms of league positions and stuff, but that was probably the peak in terms of an individual match performance, I think. There's very, very few other games that are referenced as much as that specific game is, looking back. So I mean, he's obviously got a sort of imprint on the football club and a lasting legacy.
And just finally, Glenn, what were the standout games for you? I mean, Steve mentioned the Liverpool game, but he certainly used to go for it, didn't he? He had the young attacking players, and he wasn't afraid to use them.
I mean, that game you're talking about, and that season when we finished 7th, that wasn't really the norm until it happened. Because the first sort of 3 or 4 seasons he'd been manager, we finished sort of mid-table between 12th and 14th, but had never been really in danger of going down. So, and he had a tough act to follow. With Laurent McMenemy having been there so long, and he had to regenerate the team and all this sort of stuff. And then we arrived at that particular season, and suddenly he had Letitia, Wallace, Shearer all coming through the academy at the same time. And I just remember an interview with him where he just said, well, it's against my nature, but we've got all these young attacking players. They're all good enough. So I'm going to play them all. And we played sort of 4-2-4, and more than one individual game. I just remember it was like a throwback to those early 80s sides under Laurie, where we just went for it. And yeah, we picked up some beatings, but then we win 6-3 the following week and things like that. There was a game against Luton that we won 6-3 that I do particularly remember, where I remember Shearer and Rideout scoring 2 in that game, I think. And, might be getting confused with other games. It's a long time ago. Yeah. But no, it's just that the general feeling around that season was great. And the following season we struggled a little bit, and he was a bit of a victim of his own success, I think. I think expectations were raised by finishing 7th the previous season, and everyone thought all these young players are going to be 1 year older and 1 year better. But as quite often happens, second season syndrome sort of sets in a little bit, and it was a little bit more of a challenge that year. And of course, we replaced him with Ian Branfoot, which was a great decision all round. So no, I think, overall, when you sit down and look at the overall history of Southampton Football Club, he's a very important figure in it.
Yeah, some wonderful tributes being paid today as well, following the sad news that former player and manager Chris Nicholl has passed away. Now, the last time we lost a home game to Millwall was actually at the Dell in 1989. So it's safe to say we all thought this would be a routine home win at the weekend. I mean, Millwall had lost their last 4 games. I think it was a new manager in the dugout. So I'm just going to start with you this week, Steve. What on earth went wrong? Where do we start with that performance at the weekend?
We just fell into all the usual traps against a side that came in the second half. Especially, we're quite happy just to stick bodies in the way and not leave any spaces. No interest in getting beyond the halfway line, certainly. But I mean, first half I actually thought we played quite well. We opened up the space. We were patient at the right times, and that was borne out by how the equaliser came about, because there were 2 or 3 opportunities for people to put the ball into the box, but actually that was the wrong move because they had bodies in there. And then as soon as we recycled it back out to Stu Armstrong, then all of a sudden you got Adams in the middle between 2 centre backs. He's played a perfect pass in, and we got the equaliser. Didn't create too many proper chances, but you could see that we were opening them up in certain areas. And I mean, one thing I noticed, like literally just before they got the penalty to make it 2-1, their right back tried to basically just lump the ball clear as far as he could possibly kick it, and that distance in terms of as far as he could kick it was about 15 yards, because he just looked absolutely exhausted. He looked dead on his feet already, and you're thinking, well, okay, we just keep going. This is a matter of time. And then all of a sudden, they switch on a little bit more in attack. Zian Fleming gets into a good position, plays it across, and I mean the handball. I mean you've seen them give and you've seen them not. And the problem is that there weren't too many complaints from Saints players, so it's one of those you can't really argue too much about. You certainly want it given your way. The problem I've got really is the first goal is that, I mean, that the main thing that Millwall are going to bring to the party under Neil Harris, given what we saw from his Gillingham side back in August, is they're going to put any set piece opportunity they've got, they're going to lump it into the box, and they've got a massive centre half, Cooper, who is going to be a massive distraction and a massive threat, and the other centre back, Tanganga, who ended up getting the goal, is big enough as well. And I mean, from where I was in the Northern, it looked like he'd massively hit the free kick, and that Bazunu was just going to come out and was just going to claim it just above his head, and no danger, and we're then on the counter attack. But I don't know why Bazunu's tried to kind of catch it at chest height, sort of with his hands under the ball, as opposed to sort of over the top. And as a result, that then basically gives up the advantage that the keeper has in that he can use his arms. And Tanganga gets up and gets the header. I do kind of think that someone might have been able to at least try and sort of lunge at it while it was sort of looping, sort of in slow motion towards the back of the net. But I mean, 5 minutes in, you're kind of thinking that's annoying, but let's see how it goes. And I kind of went in at half time and I thought, well, if we play like that in the second half, then they'll have no energy and we will find the gaps. But we didn't, unfortunately. We fell into sort of bad old ways of passing it side to side with no real pace or sort of plan of how we were going to kind of break the lines. And while, I mean, we've given Russell Martin a lot of praise this season for the way that he's been able to bring substitutes on and they've had an impact. I think, as I said the other week, we've scored 20 goals from the bench this season, which is basically a quarter of our goals in all competitions. And but unfortunately, the subs had basically no impact or negative impact Taking Adams off meant that we didn't have the kind of plan A and a half option of dinking the ball over the midfield into his chest to break any sort of midfield sort of pressing that Millwall were putting onto us, which wasn't a great deal, but there was a little bit of space in there that we could have worked with. But taking Adams out of the team basically removed that as an option. So the only ways we had was either down the sides or through somebody doing something ridiculous in sort of postage stamp space in the middle, and they were just crowding us out. And yeah, it was just so frustrating. I mean, I know Russell Martin wasn't happy with what sort of Millwall's tactics in terms of the physicality and the time wasting, but at the end of the day, that's on the referee. And it looked first 10 minutes like he was going to stamp down on it. 2 bookings early on for them for fairly late challenges, and he thought, okay, well he's seen what this is going to be like, and he's on it already. But that was basically the end of it. He decided after that point that that he wasn't too bothered, wasn't going to get involved. And of course, there was the most predictable thing of all, where the keeper gets booked in the 91st minute, where it has absolutely no impact whatsoever. So yeah, I mean, massively frustrating, especially on the back of the sort of three of the last 4 games now we've lost, and frankly, the games we've lost, we've not really looked like getting anything out of. Unfortunately, bad time to be hitting that little rough patch.
Yeah, we'll get onto that as well in a minute. Glenn, Russell Martin said afterwards that the tactics weren't the problem, but I think we need to talk about the tactics because we saw the team news, obviously. We saw that Flynn Downs wasn't on the team sheet. You see that midfield 3 and you go, okay, that we might be in with a shout here. We should be okay. And then we've got Jack Stevens playing as a hybrid defender / midfielder, Carl Walker-Peters on the left, and it looked like Harwood-Bellis kind of slotting in at the right. It seemed a bit more complicated than it needed to be to me.
Yes, unnecessarily overcomplicated bollocks was how I put it at the time, and You're
standing by that now, are you?
Absolutely. I mean, we went for different tactics against West Brom because they're a good side, and we were away from home, and you could see they posed a specific threat, and we set up our team accordingly, put some bigger players in to cope with set pieces, blah blah blah. And I could understand changing the tactics for West Brom, but this was Millwall at home, who are relegation fodder. They'll probably still go down, and that sounds like real sour grapes, doesn't it? But I've got no issue with Millwall. I've got an issue with the fact that we changed our tactics. Now, whether it was something specific that we thought Millwall would do, or whether it was just the Jack Stevens shoehorn coming out again, we've got to get him in the side somewhere. But I was walking across the Itchen Bridge, and I was right next to the Samaritan sign again, which is where I always get bad news. And I saw Jack Stevens' name, and then you look down the list and think, oh, who's been sacrificed? And I saw it was the fullback, so I thought it was going to be, the same as the same sort of setup as West Brom. But when the players were lining up, I'm looking at it thinking, hang on, in order to play Stevens, he's now moved 2 of our best players out of position. So Walker-Peters is now on the left, Harwood-Bellis is now right back, and then to add even more to that, Stevens plays in midfield, and that's out of position as well. And that meant that Harwood-Bellis was coming across when we lost the ball, and we had no one at right back. Occasionally they drag Smallbone in there, and if they drag Smallbone in there, then you got no one in midfield. So it just seemed like, similar to the Leicester game when we tried all the fullbacks in midfield thing and we got absolutely shredded. It just seemed that it just made us very, very disjointed. And I think there was an additional problem with Jack Stevens in midfield as well, because Millwall weren't marking him, because why would they? And so he became a magnet for the ball. And so he kept being the spare man. He kept getting the ball. And the trouble is then he gets to it's okay playing a couple of little 10-yard passes or whatever, but sooner or later you've got to cross it, or you've got to put the ball through, or you've got to do something creative. He can't do it because he's a centre half, and it's not his fault. That's just the way it is. So, and I can't help but think it inhibited Joe Aribo as well, because you didn't see him. It just seemed to me like there were too many bodies in there, too many cooks stirring the pot. I think it was a problem. But there you go. That's what we did. I don't understand why Russell Martin has gone from basically round pegs in round holes. If there's been a like for like swap when people have been injured, and we don't do it. I mean, we're not doing it now. We've discussed Shay Charles. He seems to have fallen foul of something. He's not picked. We had Will Smallbone playing as the defensive midfielder again, and we didn't have the structure around him to help him out like we did against West Brom. So he was getting pulled all over the place. And though Millwall only attacked 2 or 3 times, it just seemed to be very, very disjointed. And I wonder what the likes of, other likes of Matt Gill sort of turning around and saying, "Are you sure this is a good idea?" I do wonder that sometimes. Like we had when Ralph was doing crazy things and Danny Roll had left, we were like, who's telling him that this might not be the best idea? We went 25 games undefeated playing a certain way. And now we're, we seem to be doing something different, and we've lost 3 games in 4. So, it was a bit mystifying. And throughout the second half, I mean, the Huddersfield game, when we were behind, I always felt like we had a chance of scoring, and I felt like something was going to happen. Didn't really feel that at any stage in the second half, even though we had a couple of sort of half chances, and we had Adam Armstrong's header at the end, which was probably the best. I didn't really see it coming. And as Steve said, the substitutions, I mean, Adam Armstrong got left out because he'd been poor for the last sort of like 4 or 5 weeks, so probably lacking a bit of confidence. And then you throw him on and Rothwell, who I still haven't got a clue what that guy's about. And it's like, well, that's obviously we had to bring on a Dozy early, but that was the sort of point to change the game on the hour mark. And I just thought those two and taking, as Steve said, taking Che Adams off, mystifying, because he was playing well, he'd scored a goal, and you take him off and bring on a player who's struggling for confidence at the moment. And I just found it a bit of a mystifying day from Russell Martin, I have to say. And I think there was a little bit of deflection going on at the final whistle as well. Obviously, as Steve said, obviously unhappy with the Millwall tactics, but not really. And then saying, well, I don't blame the referee. But as Steve said, it's about the referee. I'm sure he's frustrated because Ryan Fraser was obviously taken out by, I think it was Leonard, their right back, who didn't even get booked because it was hot on the heels of a challenge that Tanganga did get booked for. And Fraser was obviously totally done in from that, and he struggled on for 5 minutes and just couldn't keep going. So the refereeing is a bit of an issue, but I think it was a bad day all round. And I just hope Russell Martin goes back to what he talked about in the tactical meeting at the start of the year that myself and Alfie went to, where it was basically about blueprinting, about if the right back gets injured, we bring in another right back, and round pegs and round holes, because at the moment, last few games, we've just not been doing that.
We'll get into the individual goals and things in just a moment. Tom, I mean, we had so many positive podcasts, and you find yourself making your TSP debut, and we're discussing a home defeat to Millwall. So Alfie stitched you right up there. What was your take on the game yesterday, and in particular the tactics and that lineup when you saw that team sheet come through? Because on paper, on the face of it, that should have been a pretty convincing home win.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I think, it would have been nice to have been selected for one of the other 25 games and have something more positive to talk about than consecutive home defeats to Hull and Millwall. Not great, but obviously you've watched Saints for a while. These things tend to happen, don't they? I mean, my first thought, I have to say, and I did ask Russell Martin about it straight afterwards, was down still isn't there, and I think it's really easy, isn't it, to say, players become much better when they're not in the team sometimes, and it's a system, it's not one player, but I mean, the stats speak for themselves in terms of how many goals we're conceding without him there. And when I can completely agree with what Steve and Glen have said, really, in so many different aspects. I mean, Shay Charles, if you forget his age for a moment, we've paid a lot of money for a player at this level who's got real pedigree, clearly. And strangely, I thought, really struggled at Bristol City, as did a lot of them, and then played, I thought, very well at West Brom, and then is out of the team again. And I'm trying not to sort of kind of pile in too much. And Alfie put his head above the parapet in the press conference, and he expected, I think, Martin to be a bit prickly with his question, and he was. So Alfie sort of said, "I'm quoting you directly, Martin," sort of looking at his notes, saying, "You said I want to leave it more to feeling and momentum and not overthink it. And do you think you overthought it today?" And he said, "No, 2 crap goals. That was it. Nothing to do with where Jack Stephens was playing, the formation, everything like that." So, yeah, he was clearly not in good spirits. And I suppose, what's the saying? Show me a good loser, and I'll show you a loser, or whatever. So there's nothing wrong with emotion, passion. But I mean, he actually came in and brought up himself. That he'd got in a bit of an argument with a supporter, I think, behind him, and I think Martin's view was, just support the team no matter what. Have a go at me, fine. But he was, he was clearly quite emotional, and it just feels like the balance has gone slightly. I think it's almost, it's slightly the opposite of the whole game for me, I thought, where I really agree with Steve. I actually thought played pretty well in the first half, and spoke to Adam Blackmore at Solent in half time, and we were saying, how are we possibly sort of losing this game? It was so dominant. And that chap, Glen, mentioned Ryan Leonard. He spoke afterwards, and he said, "We knew Southampton were a good team, but at half time, they were we didn't know they were that good. We couldn't get sort of near them. We hardly got a touch," he said. And which made it sort of inexplicable how flat it was in the second half, really. There was a few I was really pleased to see Aribo starting after he did so well, but I think, as Glenn touched on, he didn't really feature. I don't know if that was more down to him or where he found himself playing. I think David Brooks as well, flashes, clearly got so much ability and talent, but maybe didn't quite do as much as we hoped. And I absolutely agree with the point about Che Adams as well. I couldn't for the life of me see why he was taken off there. So, yeah, it really was a bad day at the office. And, I think, was it 5 points adrift now, aren't we? I think if it is the playoffs, which I guess looks most likely, the thing is you want to be going into them with some momentum. It's probably almost better to be the team in 6th that just sneaks in on an incredible run, isn't it, than the one that sort of falls into it out of form. So that's my concern a bit. But
do you think he's feeling the pressure, though, Tom? Do you think he's starting to feel the pressure a little bit? Because, like you say, I watched and I listened to some of the pre-match, post-match stuff, and he brought up the argument that he had with the fan. I probably wouldn't have known anything about that had I not seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen the clip today of him seemingly refusing to shake hands with the Millwall keeper. Whether there's anything in that or not, I don't know. And then he brings up, when you're talking about the game, it was the goals, nothing to do with Jack Stephens. Oh, hang on a minute. We're not talking about the tactics. He's almost like on the front foot a little bit. He seemed, for the first time to me, he seemed a little bit rattled after the game.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think Alfie, I've got to get the impression he sort of sensed that a bit in the last couple of games as well, really. And I suppose he's never been competing right up at this end of the table as a manager, really, yet, has he? And maybe that's it. 12 games to go. It's not a lot. And I mean, he did say, he said, "I always hold my hands up when I feel I've got something wrong, but it was nothing to do with the tactics." And I guess it is, it is such fine margins, really, isn't it? I mean, the penalty, like Steve said, could or couldn't be given. I mean, he clearly wasn't going to mention the goalkeeper at all, but quite why Bazunu sort of didn't deal with a relatively straightforward ball. I don't know, and we could easily be talking about a very different result. I mean, Rothwell as well. I mean, it's so easy, isn't it, to sort of pick everything apart? But you think in the January window, for me, left back's been a problem all season. I mean, I think Ryan Manning has had some good games, and I wouldn't sort of scapegoat him. But as I think as you saw against Hull, if he's exposed, in a one-on-one situation, he absolutely doesn't have the pace, and that's a real problem. And then we're trying to shoehorn other players in there. Magoma, I think, wasn't on the bench. He's done quite well when he's been in. Larios is there and back in training, we hear, but obviously with the injury record, can't rely on that. So that to me would have, that was a position which needed looking at far more than, I guess, sort of Rothwell as the sort of another 8. And yeah, I mean, he's clearly got some ability. He scored 2 great goals, didn't he, against Huddersfield? But I mean, that was a sitter he missed yesterday. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he is feeling the pressure. Yeah, to answer your question, Steve, definitely. I think he's quite an emotional guy, anyway, isn't he? And, I'll be a hypocrite if I said I didn't like that when it's when I see him celebrating with fans after we won the game. But you just hope. I think Glen, I really agree with Glen. You hope there's people around him. He's mentioned Colin Calderwood a few times, doesn't he? He's a kind of steady older head. You hope that they can just perhaps kind of keep him sort of level and grounded and sticking to the things that have served us pretty well so far.
Is part of the problem... Go on,
hang on, man. Something Alfie said a couple of times was that Russell Martin finds it really stressful when we have, or really hard work when we have a 3-game week. So maybe the fact that we've had 3 or 4 of those on the spin, basically, we've been playing midweek every week including next week against Liverpool. I think it's 4 weeks in a row where we've had a midweek game. So maybe it's just he's frazzled, and that explains the sort of prickly demeanour. But hopefully it doesn't explain slightly weird team selections. But I can't get my head around that. I still can't. But yeah, maybe he's just sort of like feeling the pressure a little bit, like Tom says, of being up the top of the league and having the, we got to get promoted this year. That's the bottom line for him, isn't it? That's what he was brought in to do. And so yeah, pressure and stress makes people do strange things, doesn't it? So,
do you think part of the problem, Glenn, though, is that we don't know at the moment what the best 11 is? And you think back to the sort of the start of the winning run, we knew each week what the starting 11 was going to be. Now, there's been a couple of injuries. We've had some players that have come in January. Obviously, the games have been coming in thick and fast, so you'd expect a few changes. But I think if we all wrote down our best starting 11, it would probably be a little bit different.
I think the problem is that, for me, we have 3 absolutely key players. They're the 2 centre-halves and Flynn Downs. And losing one of those, Jack Stevens would be fine as a replacement for one of the centre-halves. I'm sure, given a run of games there, he'd be fine. But losing Flynn Downs, and we've tried various things to replace that, and we haven't found it. And we all knew that Flynn Downs was a massively important player for us, given the way that we play, because we're the way we play, keeping possession, getting players forward, we are always going to be liable for the counter attack, and Flynn Downs is that insurance policy because of his pace and his tenacity, the way he gets across the park. That's the problem we've got, is that we've lost him. I think that's the biggest deal. And if he's not fit, if there's something we're not being told, apparently he was in training videos and whatnot before the game. So you would think he's not far away, but I just think it's as simple as you've got to trust the player who naturally plays that position and play him and not disrupt basically a third of the team just to bring in one certain player. Trust the player who plays the position. I think it's playing players in their best position is a vastly underrated thing for a lot of managers. And I just think we have to go back to that, back to basics. Stop trying to overcomplicate things.
So 12 games to go, Steve. Put your Mystic Meg outfit on. You obviously saw the game on Friday night, Leeds and Leicester. I think we all said the worst possible result for us would be a Leeds win, and so it came to pass. So all we needed to do was win, and it was okay. Obviously, Ipswich winning as well. Is that it for the automatics, do you think, or are you in there's still a lot of football to play camp?
Not necessarily. We've got 12 games to go, and that's 36 points. That's a lot of points. Leeds might win every single game for the remainder of the year. I don't think they will. But it's still up for grabs. Leicester showed in that last 15 minutes. As soon as Leeds never looked like scoring in that second half until the moment they did. Leicester should have been 4 or 5-0 up, missed a hatful of absolute sitters, and made a bizarre double substitution that made them just killed all their momentum. Leeds get the equaliser out of nothing, and then all of a sudden they sense blood, and Leicester fell apart. And there's a chance that Leicester continue to fall apart. I still don't think the top 2 is completely out of reach. It's 5 points. That's potentially 2 games. Who knows? Leeds have got a couple of away local derbies coming up. And they've got to play Millwall, who I think they've got quite a bad record against at home. So, yeah, that's not out of the question. Ipswich, we've seen, can have these little runs of being a little bit iffy. So yeah, maybe they stutter again at some point. Leicester have got, obviously we've got to go to Leicester in what, 3 weeks' time. Hopefully we're back to kind of full strength by then, because I think, I mean, with our full strength 11 out on the field, I think we give anybody in this division a run for their money.
Do you agree, Tom? I've got a message from Chris during the week. He says, can we have a little bit of positivity, please, amongst the inevitable, when he was talking about tonight? Is there a bit of positivity? Is it that there's still a lot of football to come?
Yeah, there is. And I think, player for player, I mean, as I said, my personal thought was the playoffs, not just after this week, but, I thought probably over the 46 games, we wouldn't have enough to be up there with Leicester and Leeds, and I'd love to be proven wrong, of course. But, if it comes down to a one-off game, I think we know there's so much talent in the squad, and there's players at the moment who are absolutely not playing probably anywhere near their ceiling. And if we are in the playoffs, I don't think we should really fear anyone in there. I mean, it has been a good season overall, isn't it? It's so easy to kind of, I think Taylor Howard-Bellis was doing the sort of player post-match duty yesterday, and he kind of said, some of the noise is unbelievable. You'd think we're in a relegation battle or whatever. But, so, yeah, you have got to keep these things in perspective. And I think we got players. I mean, it's interesting on the left side yesterday. So we're just going back a moment. We were talking about that. Walker Peters and Edozie there. I mean, in terms of like individual skill level, they had far too much for the players they were playing against. I think part of the problem was they were both right-footed players playing on the left, and things tended to slow down a bit where they had to sort of check back in. So these are all things that can be sorted out. I think momentum, confidence, all those things matter. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Fraser now, because I think he was on crutches at the end of the game. So you hope that's not too long term, because I feel like he's a big player for those moments that we might need now. But I mean. I'm not probably the first person my friends would say you'd come to for optimism when it comes to Saints. So it's a tricky position you put me in.
Welcome to the podcast.
Martin, but, yeah. So Steve has got me feeling a bit better about things. It is only 2 games potentially, but there's plenty of life left in us yet. That's for sure. And Russell Martin said that as well. This can still be a really memorable season, no doubt. In the 8 weeks, whatever we've got left. So yeah, it's going to be. I think we're going to have to sort of buckle in for a difficult ride. I don't know if I could cope with the playoffs if we are there, but deal with that when we come to it.
Just get it in the calendar, just in case. Most difficult question of the week has got to be TSP Player of the Week. I guess maybe somebody like Jack Stevens. Glenn, it's another one of those weeks where there isn't really anybody that scores above a 5 or a 6, to be honest, is there? But if we were going to have to put a Twitter poll together with a couple of names on it, can we scratch around and get 2, do you think?
Well, from yesterday's game, basically. Yeah. Che Adams.
Yep.
Che Adams, I thought, played pretty well. Stuart Armstrong had a good game as well. He looked. It was a totally different player to what played against Hull. He looked much more interested. He beat 3 players down the wing in the opening 30 seconds of the game, and that was more than he did in the entire game against Hull. So I'd say he was okay. Defenders were all a bit. At the end of the day, we let in 2 goals against Millwall, so you can't really look too much at the defenders. So I'd say, Che Adams, Stuart Armstrong. No one really made an impression off the bench, as Steve said. So those 2.
Yeah. Strange, wasn't it? It was the first week you look at the bench and go, "There's not really much there." Steve, any shouts for Player of the Week?
Not sure I can advance any more suggestions. To be honest, it was weird, especially as kind of as I say, I thought we were decent first half, but the problem is that second half was just so lethargic that it's kind of blown away any potential goodwill I had in me. Yeah. Adams, Stu Armstrong. Yeah, struggling. Edozie was bright first half, I thought, in fairness. And second half, he was kind of the only one that was still looking to at least take on the fullback, even if he didn't get round him that often. He obviously got shunted across to the right instead of what seems to be his favourite left side. to allow Sulemana to slot in there. But he was okay, I guess.
Anyone we missed, Tom?
I don't think so. No, it's slim pickings this week, isn't it? It's tricky. I mean, I think, strangely, I actually thought the defenders were sort of okay, mostly. I mean, they didn't have much to defend against because Millwall hardly crossed the halfway line. I guess you sort of think not because of the penalty, but I thought Bednarak was okay. But yeah, I mean, the attacking players really were disappointing, I think, other than perhaps Adams for me. So I guess I'd probably be inclined to go with him.
All right, we'll add him to the list and we'll get that poll up on social media. The Saints are back in action with a visit to Liverpool in the FA Cup 5th round on Wednesday night. Positives, Glenn. I mean, they had to play 120 minutes of football today, and also they've already got a trophy. So maybe their eye will be off the ball on Wednesday.
I can't help but feel that this is going to be a pretty low priority game for them in the context of their season. Stuttering championship side at home in the FA Cup. So obviously their young players are very good. As we saw 5 of them get on the pitch today. I think quite a number of them will be playing on Wednesday. I think they lost another sort of senior player to injury today. It was Gravenberch went off after 20 minutes or whatever. So it'll be interesting to see how Liverpool approach it. And it'll be interesting to see what we do, obviously, because, do we see this as a chance to get things going again and put in a really good performance against Liverpool in this game? Or are we going to treat it like teams tend to treat cut games these days and field a sort of half and half team? But I'd like to think we'd go fairly strong and we'll have a decent shout. I think there's more of an incentive to put a stronger team now that we've actually lost a couple in the league in a strange sort of way, because there's some we've got to get some momentum back somewhere. So we might as well go for it in this particular game. It will be difficult playing at Anfield. Of course, is tough. They'll be in party mood because they've just won a trophy, even if it is one of the smaller ones as far as they're concerned. We'd kill for it, of course, but yeah, and they've got lots of injuries, and they've got more important games to come. I mean, it would be the story of all stories if Klopp's last game is winning the Premier League. So in a funny sort of way, I'm never liked the guy particularly. I've actually warmed to him a little bit this year because
now you know that he's going. Oh, right.
Yeah. Well, now I know that he's going. I just sort of kind of think what he's competing with, Manchester City and their 115 charges and the nation state behind them and all that. I think you've got to have a bit of respect for the guy, even though he can be a bit of a Burke at times. Funnily enough, I'm actually looking forward to the game more now than I was when the draw was made. Yeah, because it's a free hit as long as we go and give a good account for ourselves. But if we turn up to this game with no sort of defensive midfield strategy like we've had the last few games, they're going to go in dry, and we're going to be walking like we've been sat on a horse for 2 days after that. It's just going to be awful. So we have to take it seriously and play it properly. And it's an interesting sort of test. I mean, should we get promoted, which is a bit further away than it was a few weeks ago. How are we going to set up against these teams? You can't just play the ball around constantly, and we're not going to have 100% or 90% possession or whatever. So it'll be interesting to see how we cope with that. In fact, I think it'll probably suit us better not having as much possession in this particular game, because we'll have to be solid, and then we can play on the break. So yeah, free hit, bring it on, and if we get an hammered, I can turn the TV off. Simple as that.
If you go back to post Watford, Tom, we were talking about it as actually, Russell Martin will be relishing this because it's an opportunity to pitch himself and play against one of the top teams in Europe, and that's kind of what you do the job for. Saturday, after the Millwall game, he was kind of admitting that this is a bit of a distraction that he could do without at the moment. So where do you see it? How would you approach this one on Wednesday night?
Yeah, he did say that, didn't he? That we can do without it, to be honest. And then I think he sort of remembered, but isn't it great that we got 5,000 fans going up there? And we, so I think he just sort of remembered. Yeah, I mean, I don't have high hopes. I mean, I did ask him directly about Downs, and I took his answer to mean, yeah, he's really close, he's ready, but we may not bother risking him for Liverpool. So I certainly wouldn't expect him to start, and then maybe him be back for Birmingham. It's interesting, but it's so hard to know what sort of team either side will put out. I would think they'll have too much for us. He's only got really kind of one style of playing, Russell Martin, hasn't he? And you would think that Liverpool's sort of whoever they put out, physicality, pace, will probably cause us big problems. So, I mean, I can see us scoring, I think, but unfortunately, I can certainly see them scoring as well. So, it's difficult. I sort of agree with Glen though that it's become sort of more important since the draw was made in a way, because when you can statistics, 4 and 5 if we lose this, and things are starting to look a bit down, aren't they? So, but I don't know. Yeah, I'll certainly be watching it. I'll certainly be interested, and I'll be cheering very loudly if we're still in the cup. But being brutally honest, I don't expect us to be.
Steve, they've got a few injuries. I think Klopp said after the game today, said we don't have a team for Wednesday, which is obviously him making excuses already. But they're struggling a bit, aren't they? So their squad is so young at the moment, they might struggle on a school night. But I don't think we don't go there and make 9 changes again, do we?
Oh God, no. But I mean, Liverpool and all the big clubs whinging about players getting injured. I mean, this is what you wanted, lads. This is what you wanted. All these you want the extra games in the Champions League. Well, I mean, in order to get those, you have to play league games. Where's the space in the calendar? They've now got eight Champions League games coming in from next season. So how's that going to work on the players' bodies? They're going to be dead. It's ridiculous. And you can't kind of give out with one hand in terms of complaining about these sort of fixture pile-ups, while simultaneously being a successful team who win stuff on a fairly regular basis, and also taking the money and the riches that come from it, in terms of the TV deals. Because I mean, if you only want to play 25 games a season and the players to be in absolutely peak physical condition every time, fine. But you're not getting this £5 billion TV deal every year. So sorry, you can't. One doesn't exist without the other. So just got manage your squad better, and don't bring players back before they're ready. I mean, you look at Chelsea. I mean, Chelsea have obviously got a stupid size squad, and they're continually getting loads of players injured. Like Reece James, prime example. They always rush him back early, and then act surprised when his hamstring goes again. It's just ludicrous, the way that the players are being managed at these top clubs, because they've just got so many games, and they don't feel that they can seemingly trust certain players in their positions, which kind of just speaks volumes for their recruitment, really. I mean, it's interesting watching the cup final today, actually, where, I mean, you basically had extra time where it was Van Dijk and Liverpool's under 14s.
Yeah.
And deservedly won, because, I mean, I think I heard apparently Pochettino has said in one of his post-match interviews that basically we had a chat with the players and they wanted to play for penalties. I mean, at a club that in the last 20 years must have won more trophies than any other English club. And yet that is the prevailing attitude from both players and management.
That should be a sacking offence on its own. That should be.
I wouldn't disagree with that. Liverpool certainly obviously have a very different approach to it. But I mean, you look at the bench that Liverpool named today. There was basically 2 senior players and a load of players with squad numbers above 50. And I would be quite surprised if the side that starts at Anfield on Wednesday isn't pretty young, pretty green. Whether or not we can take advantage of that in terms of their sort of experience at the level or not, I don't know. I mean, as I say, they all look pretty comfortable out there on the Wembley turf this afternoon. Yeah, so I mean, doesn't take a sort of expert to say it's not going to be an easy game for us. But I mean, it's a one-off, and you never quite know. I'd like to think we'll go in full strength just kind of because I feel we should. But on the flip side, it's clearly obviously more important that we get back on our sort of feet in the league.
Mm-hmm.
But then could a performance in the cup be the springboard to do that? I mean, sending the reserves out to get battered 5-0 isn't going to help anybody, I don't think.
No, and as Glenn says, it's it's a free hit, isn't it? 5,000 Saints fans travelling up. It's going to be a great atmosphere. They need to put a shift in. I think what we're saying is we've got a chance, so you can't ask more than that, really. At the weekend, it's back to league action with a trip to Birmingham, a chance to get back to winning ways. Well, I mean, that is the big question. Birmingham, another team that have been struggling, Glenn. We said that about Millwall, and that was an interesting one. Mark Venus looks like staying in charge. Obviously, Tony Mowbray recovering from an illness. They gave Ipswich a good game, but they've only won, I think, is it one in their last 10 games or something like that? They've been struggling anyway. So your thoughts on this one on Saturday? A good chance for us to get back to winning ways?
Yeah, it is, but we've got to do it properly. I mean, there can be no room for complacency after, our sort of aura of invincibility, if you like, has disappeared somewhat in the last few weeks. So Birmingham will think they'll have a chance at home against us, whereas they maybe wouldn't have done a few weeks ago. So, and to be honest, they need the points because they're heading very swiftly to where Wayne Rooney was going to take them towards the bottom three. So they will need a result in the same way that Millwall needed a result. So I think it's just a tough game. Mark Venus will be trying to put his stamp on things. I mean, he's get well soon. Tony Mowbray seems like he's always been a genuinely good guy. Mark Venus will have got the job. He probably wouldn't have wanted the job. It's been dumped on him essentially in strange circumstances. So he will be wanting to do the best for Tony Mowbray. So hopefully he comes back and takes over with the club in a healthier place. So I think it'll be a difficult game. Last time we played them, we got a bit fortunate. We had an offside goal, and we should have given a penalty away when Bazunu did what he did yesterday, oddly enough, and came out a little bit late and flattened a player. So they've won their last 2 home games as well, Birmingham.
That's right.
So it's not going to be a gimme, that's for sure. And we have to go out there, start well, and not give them anything. Not give away a stupid goal. I mean, one thing Russell Martin and I 100% agree with the weekend is that we've now started conceding the first goal, whereas during the 25 game run, more often than not, we scored the first goal. But ever since that Huddersfield game, which should have been the wake up call, I know West Brom we played well, but we've been letting in the first goal and then struggling. So we need to get back to that. So a nice positive start. Hopefully the Liverpool game doesn't take too much out of us in that we don't get any injuries and stuff like that, and we can hopefully have Flynn Downs back. He won't play against Liverpool, by the way. We can hopefully have him back for the Birmingham game and get back to the team that we know we can be.
Tom, it was 3-1 at St Mary's back in the day when they were known as Wayne Rooney's Birmingham. Going to be a difficult game, a different game, I'm sure, at the weekend. But Leeds, Leicester, Ipswich, us, we've all put 3 past them at some point. So it's going to be a tough game, but we've got to win this one, surely.
Yeah, I think so. I do feel fairly confident for this one. I mean, I'm sure they're going through the clips of the various goals we've conceded in the last 3 or 4 weeks, and they'll get belief from that, Birmingham, for sure. And we'll certainly think that if they can get at us quickly, and Neil Harris said we really want to put pressure on the goalkeeper yesterday. When they try and play out from the back, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a sort of come them flying at the traps in a very high press. But I think we've got better players than they have. There's no doubt about that. And I think they've just got to believe that that what they've done so far, on the balance of probability, will be good enough. I think for as long as I can remember, we've never really been a club who, no matter who's playing or who the manager is, that respond very well to sort of adversity in game, and I thought we'd sort of got round that a bit with the amount of late goals that we'd scored, and that's perhaps the most eye-opening thing for me about yesterday again was that we almost seemed to get sort of worse as the game went on, and that, we haven't really seen that. So, I think it's particularly with Downs back in there, and that spine sort of back together, and I hope he sticks with Adams as well through the middle. I think it will come good again. They've just got to sort of keep the faith a little bit now, and that's what this sort of run is testing in all of us, really, isn't it? We've got players that other teams would absolutely love to have playing for them, and for the most part have been fairly consistent and good this year. So yeah, I think we'll win at Birmingham. I don't think they're great. My dad's a Birmingham City fan, so certainly hope so. But I think it's just sort of time for everyone to take a breath, I think, isn't it? What happens in midweek, who knows? I really think that's a tough one to call in terms of scoreline and everything like that and how we might approach it. But I think every reason to be confident going up to St Andrews.
Do you think it helps, Tom, being away from home as well, just with maybe the pressure off a little bit, just sort of reflecting back on Russell Martin and the post-match stuff that he was talking about? And do you think it would just be good to get away and be away from St Mary's, and actually if we do concede the first goal, we've still got time, and the away fans will be behind them?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, Martin. I do think so, and I think I thought the crowd were, and the atmosphere generally was pretty poor in that whole game, and you could argue that maybe the team didn't give the supporters a lot, and actually I thought the atmosphere was a lot better yesterday, and fans generally did sort of stick with the team a lot more, and obviously away from home that's always the case. Brilliant support, and I'm not sure if the away end is sold out. I imagine it almost certainly will be. So yeah, I do think that perhaps can help at the moment. I mean, people always point at our record away at the top sides in this league not being particularly good, don't they? And that's obviously going to be tested in playing the three above us in the coming weeks. But yeah, as I say, we've seen games this season, plenty of them, where we've just had far too much quality for the opposition, and 9 times out of 10, as long as you don't do something too maverick with maybe sort of Stevens playing in the 10 role or something next week, then we should be okay, I think. But I think that is a good point. We did, in that run of 4 defeats earlier in the season, there was it was really starting to sour a little bit in those home games, the atmosphere, wasn't it? And I suppose it was early enough in the season that we'd seen all the absolute kind of rubbish that had gone on for the seasons before it as well. So he has got some credit in the bank, Martin, absolutely, I think, and the players as well. So yeah, we were never going to, I don't think, go unbeaten for the rest of the season, unfortunately. So it's not a disaster. We can get back on track, and a perfect game to do it, I think.
They've had some good results, Steve, Birmingham. They've ground out some good results. They've had some bad defeats as well. It's a bit unpredictable, this one.
Yeah, they're a funny old side, and ultimately with obviously Tony Mowbray stepping back for the rest of the season and Mark Venus taking his place, it's difficult to know whether it's a case of whether Venus is offering continuity or whether he's got his own different ideas. Ipswich obviously ground them down in the end at Portman Road yesterday, but it kind of sounded like Ipswich were largely in control for the vast majority of that game, and the equaliser on half-time came sort of massively against the run of play. So I do kind of think that at the end of the day, they're still in that league position for a very good reason. And hovering, I mean, what are they? 3 points above the bottom 3. It's very tight down there, but there's a lot of teams that frankly just aren't very good, and we've got to kind of put yesterday's events out of the mind very quickly. And Saturday's a whole new one where events are hopefully going to be very different. Get back to playing how we're a bit more comfortable playing. Birmingham as the home team may be a bit more adventurous, which you would think gives us a little bit more space to operate in. It's not going to be Birmingham sticking 10 men behind the ball with one lump up front to kind of hold things up. I think they'll play a fairly normal sort of system for a side playing at home. They've got some good players. It's not like they're not Rotherham, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So they're not they're not going to go into a home game playing ultra defensive. I think they'll have watched yesterday's game and see, oh, okay, maybe Southampton are kind of ripe for the taking for one of us sort of weaker sides, and hopefully that as I say, that plays into our hands a little bit.
Trevor said this week, at least in the past 2 matches, we've discovered our main problem. We struggle against teams who press us, and we struggle against teams who don't press us. Against teams who neither press or don't press, we should be fine. So we'll take that into Saturday. I just want to do some score predictions. I must just say, Tom, 4 pods in a row where no one has got a single point in the predictions league that we do. So you're playing on behalf of Alfie today. I would normally say as well, this is a safe space where we can just say what we think the score's going to be, and it's never going to come back to haunt us. Although that wasn't the case after the Millwall predictions. Unfortunately, we got that so horrendously wrong. So have a little think. Steve, I'm going to come to you first. Score prediction for the Birmingham game, please.
I think, as I say, it's not going to be an easy one, but I think we'll do enough. 2-1 win.
2-1 win. Glen's just folded his arms and rolled back in his chair. What are you thinking, Glen?
It's remarkable. Steve always says the same thing that I'm about to say. Can you come to me first next time?
You think 2-1 this time, do you?
Just getting boring, and then I have to change, and then we're both wrong anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered. But so I was going to say 2-1, but I'll be a tiny little bit more optimistic and go for 2-0. I don't think it'll be particularly free flowing or exciting or anything like that, but I think we'll do enough to get the job done, and hopefully, I live in hope that we'll set up the way that we've set up all the way through the 25 game unbeaten run, please, and get the job done. So yeah, 2-0.
Okay, Tom.
Well, I thought as the guest I was going to be given the privilege of going first, but and I genuinely was going to say 2-0, Glen. But I don't want to do Alfie any favours anyway, so it doesn't matter too much, does it? I think, I'm feeling confident. Wasn't feeling necessarily this confident, but why not 3-0? I think.
Okay, I think I'll take the draw. To be honest, just to be different, I'll take the 1. Or if you're watching the live stream on Sunday evening, do put your score predictions in the comment section so we can see those. That's pretty much it for this week's episode. Don't forget you can follow Total Saints Podcast on all the social media platforms. Just have a search for @TotalSaintsPod. It is great when we hear from you throughout the week, so you can drop us a DM on any of the socials, or you can email us via the website if you have something to share. And as I mentioned at the start, do check out the merch store, which is shop.totalsaints.co.uk. Loads of new items have been added to there this week. You'll also find us on Patreon. That's where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. Just visit patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast. There's 4 tiers on there, ranging from £5 to £20 per month. And each of the tiers comes with its own perks, including some weekly shout outs for the patrons in our Francis Benali or our Mick Shannon tiers. So thank you to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins, Andy Hollis, Anthony Thompson, Saints in Exile, Gavin Ford, James Harron, Nicky Nicholson, Southampton NY, Drew Dyer, James Kibbe, and Mike E in the Francis Benali tier. And also to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Nick Reed, Paul Stewart, Phil Horstrup, Matt Hall, and Mark Littlewood in our Mick Shannon tier. Thank you, Steve. Thanks, Glenn. Thank you to Tom as well for stepping in tonight. Thank you for watching and listening. And we will see you again next Sunday evening at 7:15 for the live.